with forehead.
You still got some hair up there. Let's show it off.
It's fairly thick. It's just a little further back on the forehead. So,
Okay. Guys, welcome to Conversion Icon. This is Allen Kotlyar, and today I am really excited to have a good friend on with us, Jack Austin. Hey, Jack Austin, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here, Ellen. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. I wanted to introduce you to the people that are listening because Jack actually had an incremental um, event happen in both my life of where I was going as a digital marketer. Back originally when I was just started on this journey of figuring out what I was going to be doing, how I was going to approach my career. Jack actually introduced me to one of my first mentors, Dan Kennedy. I remember back in the day when I was going to college on the route to USC, ready to pay 40 grand a year in community college. And Jack and I met each other at a seminar, and we just hit it off. You know, he's been like a big brother to me, always providing the best knowledge, best resources, best consultants, best trainings. Anytime I had a question, he was the guy to go to. He has a ton of experience working with Tony Robbins and other big speakers in the industry, helping them on mindset, marketing, and being able to really provide them with the strategies to help identify what are their limiting beliefs. And for those of you that don't know what limiting beliefs is anything that is holding you back from not being empowered. And as an entrepreneur and as a digital marketer, we go through our life and experience noticing things that are working well and things that aren't working well. But behind those things are our beliefs and our core philosophy. And what we're going to be talking about today with Jack is how entrepreneurs and business owners can really evaluate what's working for them and what's not working for them, and how to be able to take their mind and literally wash it of all of the negative thoughts, the self sabotage, the things that are holding you back from completing your projects and making money online. So Jack, why don't you take it from here and we'll see how the conversation goes. Glad to have you on Conversion Icon and very excited to find what's the latest projects you've been working on and what you recommend for people who are in this digital space of how to optimize their life, their career, and their mindset.
It's a pretty broad spectrum of topics there, Alan. Um, yes, and it has been a while that we've known each other. So I think that was 2009. Um, what I've noticed is that actually, gosh, it was earlier than that. Um, is that a lot of people who get started in entrepreneurship have never been their own boss. So they don't necessarily have the habits established that they need to have to be able to set up their own schedule and to be able to determine how to be able to measure what's working and what isn't. Uh, the consequence of that fact is that they can get very disorganized, and then they can have a lot of challenges as a consequence of it. That that's you know very common. It also is created because people don't understand how to set boundaries, and it, what ends up happening is this a sort of a self-interpretive loop. We end up thinking about how our interpretations of the past are somehow being relived in the present, and that is counterproductive, right? So uh, if I understand correctly, your audience is people who've already had, their initial sales online. They're working at scaling. They're working at being able to be more effective and, either get more products or work with more clients if they're working in an agency environment. And I've had a number of clients who were agency owners. And the thing that's common amongst those clients is an interpretation that what they believe is true is actually true about the world. They have a self-interpretive view of what makes sense in the world. And the more one expands a business opportunity, the more different people you're working with, the more that can be contradicted from experience. And conflicts and friction comes up in work instead of flow. So there needs to be a match between an entrepreneur's vision of what the marketplace looks like, who they're serving, what it is that they're selling, and who's buying it, right? Let's, for lack of a better term, let's say tribes, like Seth Godin uses as a term, as a master marketer and philosopher of marketing. The advantage is when a person who's doing the marketing matches their value system with the marketplace that they're dealing with. The challenges come when they don't understand their market, when they don't have alignment, and there's conflict internally within the marketer as a consequence of this mismatch. So it's really important to be able to, from the very beginning, get an idea of who it is that you're serving and how to do it. It is not just a series of technical steps, right? It's not like one blueprint works the same way for everybody. Modeling does work, right? And in neurolinguistic programming, as in computer modeling, you can take what's worked before, right? Because as Tony Robbins says, success leaves evidence, right? Leaves tracks. But the challenge is you have to be able to match it correctly to the market. So you need to have message to market match, and you need to have values to market match. And if the tool that a person is using, the marketing methodology or the marketing channel, is a mismatch for that market, or the messaging in that channel is a mismatch for that market, it won't match up, right? Any marketer could tell you that. Certainly you've experienced when you're trying to dial in, how is it that my audience thinks? Am I targeted correctly? The challenge is having the growth mindset, the openness to ask more questions and to try, right? To try different approaches until you get to an approach that actually works, and not interpret that somehow or another it's some negative aspect of oneself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important when you're in a pre-launch or you're working on a new concept is to get the feedback of the community you're going to be serving. Because oftentimes we have an idea in our head that we said, wow, this is going to be a brilliant business, or, if I would want it, somebody else would want it. But what we've discovered when looking at successful launches of websites that worked or products that work, it's because they've developed that tribe, they've pre-sold it, they've actually found a need of somebody in the community, or and developed those people. So by asking these questions and delivering a product that is exactly what they need, they can successfully achieve the result that they want, and being able to deliver that to people. Exactly what you're saying, Jack.
So it's it's not just, right, the money's in the list, it's the money's in the relationship to the list. It's the engagement with the list. And if you're building a list by doing, outbound marketing, buying ads, or, doing banner ads, or some sort of outbound mailing to some sort of purchase list, it's still in the relationship to the list, because you need to find out, just because a person's external characteristics look the same. They're within the same age group. They have the same relative, religious background. They have the same, um, newspaper or magazine subscriptions. Does not mean that they are actually thinking the same way, because the psychography is much more important than that just external characteristic of their market segment that they may be a member of.
So yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more. How do we figure out what's going on in our clients' heads, and how do we figure out that psychography?
Well, I mean, you mentioned, for example, having a platform that you're already involved in, right? If you're working with people who are, members of Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups or some other platform group that is oriented around marketing, you're going to be hearing other marketers talk all the time. Well, that's great, but unless they're your audience, that's not the right group. To be able to get into a group of the people who you want to sell to and then have conversations with them, eliciting what it is that it's important to them. What do they value, right? What are their top three things that they value? Family, faith, money, you know, where do these things stand in their life? How do they relate to them? This really matters. And if there's a consistency with the market that you're looking for, this is really important to notice, right? But the most important thing to get is the language they use about what it is they talk about. Because you can be talking about the same thing with different words and it won't land for people. They won't hear you because it won't be in a language they understand, right? I think the classic example was Eben Pagan's original um, marketing program when he was doing Dating for Dollars, or Double Your Dating, right? His copy was so well matched to his audience, people thought he was writing directly to them. Men would read these sales letters, they would read these emails, and they would swear that he was their friend and talking directly to them. And needless to say, through that process, we now have one of the most successful digital marketers around. I don't know, somewhere around $35 million a year is his regular turnover. It's certainly nothing to sneeze at. It is a very productive regular business. Now, many agencies can do more volume of gross ad buying or gross turnover, but then you have a question about what is actual take home, right? What's the bottom line? What's the
Yeah.
gross? What is the net revenue?
Exactly. And that is why before we start any website project for any of the clients or people that we consult with, we want to get down to what is their ideal avatar? What is their customer that is going to be interacting with the site? And where are they in the journey? Are they just starting to research? Are they later in the decision process? Are they ready to buy right now? What problems are they having in their life? Are they more focused on finances, or are they more focused on freedom? Where are they in their career? And listing all this down to visually what on a board they drive, to what house they have, to what kids they have, so you can, as much as possible, get a representation of that person, of who you're talking to, so that way when you write the copy and you get to know your target audience, and you get to know what their needs and desires are, you can easily craft the copy, the message, the videos, and the imagery to actually talk to them, such as in such of a way they think you somehow are talking to them specifically themselves, or know exactly the pain that they're dealing with at that time. So asking these eliciting questions are very important when you are surveying your customers, right? Or you're working on a new project and somebody seems interested, and you ask them questions such as, what would you want in this software? Or how could you see this benefiting you? Or asking the questions, what's most important, feature one, two, or three? So what can you cover a little bit more about what people can do about illicit questions and how to actually get these answers that can help them in their current projects, Jack?
Well, part of, you know, Russell Brunson talks about a likable character, right? So this is the idea of the avatar. And it's important that you can relate to that avatar. This is why I brought up values, because um, selling to somebody that's completely unlike you can definitely be done. You know, digital marketer does that. They have multiple channels that they market into, but they also have expert copywriters who create these campaigns, and as a consequence they've already done research on these groups. To be able to get the right answers from people, you have to really be open to it. It's not like the psychological survey of the guy with a white coat who has no, you know, um, connection. Connection is a really critical thing to be able to put somebody at ease so that they can feel as though they're actually involved in conversation where somebody cares. Because once that rapport has been established, and it all starts with rapport, there's a level of subconscious connection that occurs that puts people at ease, that establishes that they're not being judged, that they have the ability to be able to open up. And then you try to enter the conversation where they are already having it. So depending upon the kind of product that you are selling, or service that you're selling, you need to be able to ask questions that would go further into why somebody cares about what they're talking about. So if it's their pet, what is it about their pets that they love? What position in their life does the pet have? How many people in the family interact with the pet? What kinds of food do they buy for the pet now? What kind of grooming do they have for the pet? What is, is the animal indoor, outdoor? And you want to get into enough granular detail to find out how it is that a person spends money to care for them. Because I can say right now that veterinary costs have skyrocketed since, I started out with the first dog that we had as a kid, right? I mean, people are willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars on surgeries for their dogs, and they feel like it's a member of the family. Not that many people have pet insurance in this country. They do in the UK. So the reason that I bring that up is because those expenses can be anticipated when you have an animal for a long period of time. There's a deep connection with an animal. There's a deep, heartfelt bond. And people are going to have specific language about what they think about the dog's tricks, when they've been disappointed in how the dog behaves, when they've been disappointed in services or food or product that they've had before, which is, needless to say, something that you'd want to avoid if you're selling a product, but it could be a very good counterpoint as talking about where people have been disappointed before and how your product won't do that, right? So it's important to be able to ask questions that are going to draw people in to giving you specific language and specific values that are most important around their animals. And it's not just enough to have a surface touch, one or two words. It's important to be able to have the a warm, comprehensive, fitting message that is able to touch people. It may only have really key core touch points in a few places, but it has to have the overall feeling that people associate and be congruent, right? And by congruent, I mean consistent throughout, right? It
Yeah.
needs to sound and feel the same. It can't be the sort of mixed signal of having one expression and having a different tone. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is why with the most successful brands, you see them using the same colors and tonality
Oh,
and speakers, because they want to keep that holistic brand throughout everything, from the logo down to the colors, down to the actors, down to the wording, down to the website, down to even the customer return policy. All of that wording has to be specifically written in such a way that they talk directly to the customer avatar. That is the most general person. So now people probably listening are wondering, well, all my customers are different. How do I find a commonality that is between all of them so that I can resonate with their desires? So how does somebody do that if they're dealing with people that are all ages, all types of races, backgrounds, different professions? How do they find that similarity, and how do they be able to communicate it so that way it's well heard?
well, it kind of depends on whether or not you're talking about a generalized business selling, general topic items like a general merchandise store, or you're talking about somebody that's marketing a particular specific product. Because a specific product is going to have an appeal to a certain grouping of people. It's not going to have an appeal to everybody. And there are different market segments that need to be spoken to differently. One of the biggest challenges I think that a lot of marketers have is that the majority of marketing that we're exposed to in the broad public is really kind of generic, but well branded. In other words, it has the same consistent colors, the same logos, the same character name, whatever, if you're talking about McDonald's or something of that nature, right? Back in the day when there were hamburglers and, cartoon characters and things of that nature, before that became outlawed, because it was considered to be unfair influence on children's minds, and justifiably so, because kids were dragging their parents to McDonald's because they wanted to get a cartoon character or meet the hamburglar. Um, because that kind of marketing works,
Yeah.
and thus Disney, right, works really, really well. But it's not generic, right? It's specifically designed to appeal to the unconscious mind of the child. We all have that unconscious mind, and it's actually our limbic system that makes the decision. People can justify a purchase through rationalization, right? They will rationalize why they buy, but they make the decision to buy how they feel. And that goes to the midbrain, right? Our human brain. And you need to get past, the gatekeeper of the lizard brain, the reptilian brain, the survival brain, in order to do that, which is why it's important to talk about what it is people value, right? What are their beliefs and values that are in common about whatever the topic may be. Um, Dogs, cats, laundry detergent, children's clothes, you know, sheets.
Yeah.
If a person is looking to be able to market, you know, 300 count Egyptian cotton sheets, they need to talk about the thread count being important, the consistency being important, the high quality being important, the feel of those sheets compared to lesser quality products,
Yeah.
thus justifying its greater cost.
Exactly. Exactly. An example of a laundry detergent, right? When you go down the aisle, each brand has a different message, right? They're talking to
Mm-hmm.
people differently. There's ones who on the front are saying, 20% more volume per box, the same price, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
one message. They're going after price. That's their message, right? So they've done enough research to know that their customers are more interested in price versus another brand that sells for twice as much. That's all specifically focused on holistic products, right? That their demographic, and when they surveyed or talked to their customers and got to know what they understand, for them it was more important not the value or the cost. It was more important that it doesn't leave residue on their clothes that are toxic. So when you're starting to develop your website or your brand, you have to really not go off of what you think your audience wants, but actually start getting into their head, start building an audience around a topic that you believe, and get to know your people, get to know your prospects, get to know people that are adding you as friends on Facebook or joining your group, and actually develop content based off of what they would want and what are the topics that they would find interested, that would initially solve the main problem of why they searched out for you in the first place. So
Hmm.
very, very cool stuff. So Jack, let's talk about, you have extensive background in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, how to actually make the mind work with you then versus against you. So
Hmm.
let's talk a little bit about self defeating habits. Let's talk a little bit about why people read a book and never get past chapter one. Why do they buy a course that they're so excited for, sometimes spending thousands of dollars, and never actually implement the material? What is holding back people from their next stage in life and in career and in business? Why do people do this?
Well, Alan, at core, what it really comes down to is people's identity. So the way that the subconscious is constructed, which basically is filled with material that we received at the ages between 0 and 7 years of age, that just came into us before we had what's often referred to as a critical factor, is ideas that other people had, which were unquestioned. So beliefs about money, beliefs about a person's position in the world, a belief about what a family is or does or how that family is. Like a family belief that, if there's a hard job, give it to a Russell, right? If there's an easy job, give it to a Johnny, right? There's all kinds of conclusions that have been passed on that are unquestioned. Now, this exists in the first place for us to be able to take in lots of information and get a head start. The challenge is it's contradictory information in many cases. It doesn't match up. So if we get into a decision where we have a challenge to make a decision around what might be considered a large amount of money, we may subconsciously be experiencing mother's viewpoint about money, which came from a family with none of it or very little of it, and dad's viewpoint about money, which came from a family with a lot of it. So dad has a very open, attitude. So let's go out and shake the money tree. And mom's attitude is, oh my God, you can't spend money like that because it's dangerous and you won't have any and it's hard to come by. Well, right there, you've got one foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brake. That is a standard conflict that people have. The decisions that we make are based upon the information that we have. And that information is often, if almost never, logical, rational, data-based information. We are not computers. The human brain is created of multiple different parts. There's sort of the reptilian lizard brain, then there's the mammalian brain, and then there's the later developmental human brain with the superconscious and the cerebral cortex, each one having a different biochemistry, a different primary function, and connected to different parts of the system. We typically have to get out of fight or flight in order to be able to make a decision about money, for example, unless it's just fear based. And that would mean we have to get out of the reptilian brain. So, one of the experiences that I have on a fairly common basis is working with entrepreneurs about getting out of the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the reactive mind. It is pure stimulus response. It's fight or flight. It's where people are experiencing fear and scarcity states the most often. It typically pulls from the left lobe of the brain, and it is driven by something called the amygdala. So people have an amygdala hijack, for example, is something fairly common. And that can be to a legitimate threat, such as something physical in the world, a car coming down the road, a train, a saber-toothed tiger, but there are not so many saber-toothed tigers these days, right? So having an immediate jump response is very valuable for legitimate threats. But if we're being triggered by notifications and alerts from social media, conversations that are being held by other people, news media or social media digital marketers that are trying to get us to pay attention to their news, it can wear on our system and keep us in a low level of fight or flight on a regular basis. And that is not a place to be able to be creative from. It's not a place to make good decisions from. It's not a place to be able to be in connection with oneself from. It keeps one from being present with themselves and others. So this is a place where I often start with entrepreneurs, because they typically are very, very bright and have been very effective in doing certain things in their life. But what they're setting their attention to is problems that are not tangible, right? They're working on a project that has, multiple different facets. And if they're distracted, it breaks their concentration, which takes a lot more time to make their headway in their project. Now, once a person can get out of the fight or flight and get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and relaxation, right? Or you could relate it to sitting meditation. A person can be present in the now and make decisions that are more responsive to what's going on rather than reactive, right? The difference between road rage and lane change, right? If I interpret that somebody's lane change is a bad decision because they nearly cut me off or they swerve into my lane for some reason, a lot of people will frequently make the decision that somehow or another people are purposely doing something, right? They're making the interpretation that someone is planning to do something rather than just they dropped their coffee or they just got bad news on a telephone call, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the perspective that no one is purposely thinking of harming them. So they go into a reaction. They're prepared to react. Well, that's not necessary most of the time.
Yeah.
It's better to be in a more balanced frame of mind. From that position, we don't get triggered as much. And this is one of the things that will happen with a course. So for example, the question that you asked about what is it about somebody getting started on a course? Why don't people finish them? Well, one, they get distracted. One of the reasons they get distracted is because they're not used to establishing this idea of discipline for themselves to work on a project that is self-initialized and self-disciplined. They either don't have the discipline established or they don't set up discipline around them by having accountability partners or checklists and tracking that will keep them on target.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is that as they start trying to learn the information that's in the course, they will go into thought reveries about when they've had information like this before or what it reminds them of. And oftentimes, because they're taking on new information, which may be asking them to be growing and becoming a different person, it goes against their identity. this information we took in unconsciously as we were children, who we think we are versus what we're actually capable of. That
Mhm.
contrast creates tension. It creates a lot of tension in the system, and that's uncomfortable and it feels bad. And thus, distractions are desired,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes,
Because it
absolutely.
gives a break and relief from that pressure. If we're bought into our future vision, if we are really invested in a clear picture of what we're creating, the obstacles can seem almost minuscule or non-existent because they will seem very small in comparison to the benefits of finishing the course.
Absolutely. So that brings up a couple of key factors. It's what is your why, right? Your why,
Right.
right? So like I've done it, you've done it. Like we have a problem, we go search the internet, we find somebody who has a course or a book, and they have all the marketing material that talks exactly to our pain, just as if a doctor would walk in when you're having a heart attack, and it's perfect. You're like, I need this. You buy it. All of a sudden you start going through the course, you're like, okay, this is good, but all of a sudden you feel that you no longer need it because you took action. Now, your root cause of why you wanted to get the book or the course comes down to your why. So is your why, I need something to resolve this? Oh, I have a book, it resolved it. No. That book didn't do anything. That course didn't do anything till you did action, right? Action, knowledge without implementation is worthless. So that comes down to your internal belief system. That comes down to your internal drive, and that comes down to your why. So why don't you talk about why having a why is so important, and how people that are motivated to get up early have it and ones that don't. And if you don't have this, you're literally like a ship without a rudder going as the whims of your life in any direction.
Well, if you start with why, you're starting with a question that Apple started with, and it's an inside out view of the world. How and what are more external? And much of the world and many products in the world that are marketed come from an outside in viewpoint. And it's one of the reasons why only 18% of business offers are closed on average around the world in most businesses, because people are talking about the problem rather than connecting with the value of solving the problem, the emotional state that gets people to make a decision. When someone feels connected with a why, they will take action that's consistent with that vision. They will take action when someone talks to their pain, but there may be no further step going on to it. And this can be as sadly simple as the common thing that happens for most people when they're raised, and that is mom says when a child is sick, you need to go to the doctor, right? And you get to the doctor. Now, she didn't say you need to go to the doctor, you need to get a prescription, you need to be medicated, you need to take it for 3 days and then you can feel better. She said you need to go to the doctor. Studies show that 60% of people feel better in the doctor's office waiting room because they fulfilled an auto suggestion of needing to go to the doctor. Seriously, that's how much we are influenced by subconscious suggestion. We are the placebo, as Joe Dispenza says. And this, we can go into the deeper rabbit hole of how people become ill and so forth. But the key is that that influence affects people very, very deeply.
Absolutely.
The why, right, is a self convincing process. A person's why is where they connect their feelings of what they value in the world and their identity of either who they now are or who they're becoming, who they're meant to be, who they are destined to be. So if a person needs to develop greater capacity and grow, which virtually everybody does to be able to achieve the next level of their success, and that doesn't matter if it's Russell Brunson, Tony Robbins, you know, whoever you might, Richard Branson, right? Whoever you might think of, or quite possibly the second richest man in the world right now is Elon Musk because of the new valuation of his Tesla stocks. The Jeff Bezos being number one, according to current studies. The the connection with that why is a driver, because identity is the second most powerful driver in a human being. And this has been studied in psychology, and it is present in neurolinguistic programming. So there's something called logical levels. The very highest level is spiritual. A person's spiritual identity is basically any change in a person's spiritual identity runs throughout their entire system consistently. So if I view myself to have achieved a certain level and I have consistent evidence of that fact, it will change everything about me. In fact, the rest of my system will become consistent to what I believe to be true about me spiritually. And that could be that I've had a religious conversion,
Yeah.
for example.
And also, I think on that topic, what was very powerful is that our why keeps on changing as we develop in our career, right? And we
Well, and in
our
our stages of life.
priorities in our stages of life, our priorities
Yeah.
change. So your reason why you picked up that book, right, or you are listening to this podcast, you really need to identify what is the underlying reason for that. Are you doing it so that way you can have freedom to be with your kids versus working the 9 to 5 like your dad had to do? Are you working on your side project so that way you can actually pay down your credit cards? But why is that important to you? Is it that you want to have the ability to sleep calmly at night knowing that all of your financial obligations are on autopilot? What is the under reason behind that? And so the more you get down to why you have this motivation, the quicker and better you'll be able to rebound when procrastination kicks in, when you're making every single decision in your life, right? When you decide to open up and read a chapter of a book versus watching Netflix. Your why has to be strong enough for you to choose the better of the two solutions. And that is where your mental commitment to your goals and your actions need to be aligned. So if you have a weak why and you have a lot of negative beliefs and you wonder why you're not doing what you need to do, is because there's a disrapport between your mind and your actions. So I truly believe that you need to choose a target and a goal that is realistic so that way you can slowly develop wins that become habits, that become mindset, that become wins in a circular motion. So that way you can work on things as small as reading a chapter of a book, right? Write it down, accomplish it. Design the homepage of my website, write it down, accomplish it. Make my first sale, make my 20th sale. As you continue to develop these things and achieve them, your philosophy of yourself will change. And I know from for me personally, even after winning a 2 Comma Club award with ClickFunnels, I still have doubt in my own ability, right? I still have limiting beliefs on how far I can go or if this will work. But what I can tell you is from where I was now versus 5 years ago is completely different. Now, when I go take on a project, I have confidence because of all of those wins along the way, because of all those factors that have molded and improved me. And I continue to develop that and continue to focus on what I want to do because of a strong why and because of the mindset strategies that Jack and other coaches and other people in the field have been able to help me get rid of. Because even with success, there's a question of what is the next level? How do you go from being good to great? And the way you do that is by identifying these limiting beliefs, empowering yourself with stronger ones, surrounding yourself with people, books, seminars, and networking and mentors who can actually help you get to that next stage. So, Jack, what would you say for somebody who is currently having some success, but hitting the top of their income ceiling and is wondering what they can do to actually move into that next phase of their career and why this is happening to them? Is it subconscious? Is it their marketing? Is it the small nuances that they're doing that they not be aware of? What sets somebody's ceiling?
Well, what sets somebody's ceiling is their subconscious beliefs. And typically it's their subconscious identity. Um, Typically, for example, if you look at a very successful athlete, they'll, let's say they have a very strong run in a particular area. You could say Tiger Woods, right? He, you know, for a period of time, he was unbeatable. And then he had a series of public events occur in that made his private life become public, and they were judged by other people. And he has never fully regained his game since that point. Now, what ends up happening is people's identity about their ability to perform in their sport is impacted by the world around them and what they perceive other people's beliefs or judgment to be, whether they are in a state of forgiveness or consistency and congruency with their own beliefs. Now, Tiger Woods makes millions of dollars a year, so it's not exactly like he's suffering, but at the same time, he's not achieving the level of success in the sport, nor financially that he's capable of achieving if he were winning consistently still. In other words, he would be, the GOAT, like, you know, um, Michael Jordan was the GOAT, right? Is the GOAT. Because in that field of basketball, no one has ever been as successful for such a long period of time and dominated that position. There are many people who place really, really well, but nobody's owned that field. And part of that ownership had to do with his beliefs about who he was, why he played the way he played, and why he was willing to make the sacrifices and do the work that he was willing to do to get those results, right? To be the very best. There was a period of time where he tried baseball again, which was a sport that he had done well at in college and loved. He was terrible because his whole life in sport after college had been dedicated to basketball. He didn't have the same skill set. He didn't have the same status. He didn't have the same orientation, and he didn't have the same mindset of identity to match up with it. He was not successful. That didn't last long because it didn't meet his needs. He wasn't feeling fulfilled. He wasn't feeling gratified, right? So there's, fundamentally, human psychology breaks down to pleasure and pain. And that which you do that gives you pleasure, you'll do more of and you'll want to do more of because the neurochemistry that's fired off is very satisfying and gives you immediate gratifying response. those things which we have to spend a long time on that we're not getting gratified on will wear us down unless we have a belief system that we are an overcomer and will consistently produce those results once we get to the point of understanding or our growth capacity we need to be at to be successful.
Yeah.
Which is why having your why deeply embedded, your why is part of your identity. Your why is part of what makes life mean something to you. And that could have to do with it being really hard, or it could have to do with it being really fun, right? There are marketers like Frank Kern who likes to be sarcastic and make it sound like it's not that difficult and it's just really kind of easy. And yeah, and it really sucked when he first started and he couldn't sell anything also, right? When he and he talks about this, right? One of the things that makes him so appealing is the fact that he's able to be so genuine and so authentic about when he screwed up, and then getting something from somebody like Dan Kennedy. So I think he had an SEC or an Federal Trade Commission (FTC) judgment against him for one of the marketing ploys that he did with one company that he worked with, and that slam got spread around. It was a negative bunch of um, information being spread around, and he was ashamed and humiliated by this event. And Dan Kennedy said, "Own it." He doubled his audience when he owned it. When he went public and talked about it and owned the fact that he'd made the mistake in the first place and what he'd learned from having made the mistake, he doubled his audience size.
Yeah.
And they were more loyal. They were like 54% more loyal than they had been previously. Huge win and a counterintuitive discovery on his part, right? The guy's made multiple tens of millions of dollars in digital marketing, teaching, consulting, and training.
Yeah. So how does somebody start changing the identity that they have in their head?
Well, first of all, you have to find out what it is that you actually do love, and then what it is that appears to be in your way from having that already, from being an expression of that in the world. Okay. And that's a self-examination process that can take the form of, an inventory, a personal inventory. It's why that's used in AA for people with addictions, right? I mean, there are literally people, in rehab for internet games, right? I guess World of Warcraft is the most addictive internet game ever created. And when people are literally have given away fortunes as a consequence of being addicted to this game, because it's so adept at addressing the pleasure pain principle inside, where people just become like the monkey in an environment where, its pleasure lobe was stimulated by scientists and it just kept pressing the button, right? Now, this is one of the examples that's used around, say, cocaine as it being dispensed or heroin being dispensed to a monkey in isolation. But that's a monkey in isolation. If we want a full and fulfilled life as social beings, we need to create environments that support us, right? So there are processes like cognitive priming that are really valuable. And what does that consist of? Well, that consists of having things that you love around you to connect with immediately first thing in the morning. It has to do with taking, actions that are stimulating to shift. If you want to lose weight, what do you want to do? You want to have your feet hit the sneakers first thing in the morning and exercise right away. Because what that's going to do is get you into immediate action. It's going to change your metabolism And that's going to change your mentality throughout the day. It's going to give you more energy. It's going to have you be more activated and more connected going forward. You're going to be more grounded, more in your body, and it's going to be easier for you to be able to take action on the things that you care about. And that could be setting up a dream board, setting up a letter written to yourself about, your successes in 6 months, right? So you write a letter in the achieved past tense where you're congratulating yourself on all the things that you accomplished over that 6-month period of time. And you read that on a regular basis as already being done.
Yeah.
You get the feelings that it's done. This changes one's internal motivation, because a lot of times what we're afraid of as people, what will cause people to shrink back from taking action, is a fear of feelings.
Yeah.
It seems really stupid, but it is so true, because we get conditioned in infancy to be overwhelmed by our feelings. It is a fact that a 70-year-old person has 7.5 times more stem cells to deal with emotions than an infant has to deal with emotions. Not only that, the infant has no coping mechanisms. It doesn't have language. It doesn't have any knowledge or education. The only thing it has is its ability to cry, to express itself, and its ability to connect and cuddle with, mother and other human beings.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've done in the past that really helped me is actually write down a timeline of all of the significant achievements in my career in life. So you start getting a solid understanding that you are a successful person. Anybody who's listening to this podcast right now is not a normal
Well,
person. They have
well,
done a few things. Even if you think that what you have done is not to the degree you want, you still have. You
well,
still know like how to read. You still know how to count money. You know how to use a computer. So the challenge oftentimes it comes back to what you were saying before is it comes back from family or upbringing or culture where it's like, well, you don't know enough to do that. And then all of a sudden you think you don't, but you're smart enough to be on the search to actually find that information. So I applaud you and congratulate you because once you start writing down what you have done successfully and you start painting the vision of where you want to go, now you can identify with the self realization exercise that Jack just talked about. Out of email marketing 1 to 10, where's your level of knowledge? Maybe you just got to move it to the next point to get to that next point in your career. And how do you prioritize that for what you need to do now? So that way it's in line with your why. All of this stuff comes together, and this is what makes the difference between somebody who's successful and somebody who's mediocre. And I think what Jack is talking about is super, super critical here.
well, Alan, it goes right down to this. The majority of people have been conditioned by our culture to believe that things are not the way they're supposed to be, and they're conditioned to believe that they should be critical of what's happening in their life and dissatisfied, which is only a function of the left lobe of the brain. That is not what happens in the right lobe. Um, so every single one of us, won the sperm lottery to be here in the first place. We get the opportunity to be alive. It's not some kind of hardship. And there are tens of millions of messages in the world which would say the opposite of that because of negativity. People's thinking that somehow being negative and critical is the ultimate state of truth or reality. And it's absolutely not. It's a habit. And it is completely up to us about whether we decide to buy into that or not. We are so hypnotic as a species that we can hypnotize ourselves into full success and full health, or the opposite. And then the choice is really ours. This is one of the things that neurolinguistic programming was created in the first place as a study of the most successful patterns that were known to man up to the point where the study was created in 1973, and then has been added on to by hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands actually, since then, about what works best and fastest for people to be successful. And we are, you know, a million generations of success as we are just in our beings right now. And that has nothing to do with our spiritual selves. That's just the body and this structure, right? If you were just looking at it from a material standpoint, from an evolutionary standpoint, we are the ultimate pinnacle of success of our species. And as far as we know, potentially of all the species that exist on this planet.
Yep.
So what we don't recognize is that the minimalization and the tamping down, the impact of the so-called tall poppy syndrome, as they refer to it in Australia, is that the tall poppy gets its head chopped off. I don't want to be known. I don't want to be noticed. I don't want to be exposed. That is the exact opposite of entrepreneurial success. Not standing up and being counted and not talking to your neighbor is the opposite of entrepreneurial success, because entrepreneurs have to communicate with each other to find out what's working now, who knows what, who knows who, and where's the next opportunity. Because the truth of the matter is that everything we dream of already exists.
It
It's
does.
waiting for us to wake our consciousness up to be able to see that it's right in front of us. Because if it didn't already exist, we couldn't even dream of it.
Exactly. And for you to even have the notion that you want it means it's in your reality.
It's already here. It's waiting for you to discover how that happened, how it can be manifested, and that usually is a process of identity and surrender, because resistance is in the fighting, in the struggle. Not that struggle won't make us stronger. Sure, resistance does make our muscles stronger, but it's not what opens up our minds. What opens up our minds is curiosity and our imagination,
Yeah.
right? The discovery of the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, right? The time in metamorphosis. Every single thing that makes up that butterfly already exists in that caterpillar. But the caterpillar has to almost eat itself to death in overconsumption before it can get into the chrysalis and conform. And in our fast food society, most people want to be able to press a microwave button and get the butterfly and don't want the caterpillar soup. And the fact of the matter is that is a tasty dining experience that we all need to have on the process. It tastes bitter when you first get it, and then you start to see the golden nuggets. It's like, that's what that experience actually meant. Oh, that's what that person was really thinking, not all the crap that I had in my mind. Because we cannot avoid having these experiences.
No,
We
we
can't,
can't.
but we can make it easier for ourselves to unfold them, go through them quickly, and experience them positively.
And that is what I also notice with a lot of people that are starting internet marketing, right? Or digital marketing, is they say it's not working, Alan. Like, I don't know why. Okay. Well, the reason why is because sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't work, but you're missing the overall lesson of it all. It's who you are becoming, right? When I started in this industry 9 years ago, I mean, like, I had no idea that a simple book about info marketing and the A to Z productation of the seminar business that I spent my last $3,000 on, which was my whole life savings in college, would dramatically lead to a whole other reality, a whole other decision, a whole other pathway. But if I would have known that to where I am now, it would have been impossible. But because of all the trials and tribulations, all the successes and all the failures sometimes a lot more failures than successes. That has molded me into the person now that when I come look at a project or when I work on a specific campaign, I know all of the nuances of the lessons that have been ingrained upon me from what has worked and what hasn't worked. And that is really the journey. It's not one website, it's not one email, it's not one system or seminar or course. It is becoming a better you so you could become a better
Well,
marketer and entrepreneur.
Alan, it's like this, right? You only have to get up one more time than you fall down to be a success,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a great uh, YouTube video that I like to share with my clients, and it's from a runner, medium distance runner by the name of Heather Dornenden, and she was in her senior year as a runner, and she was in a trial, a semifinals with a competing state championship, and in that video, she trips and falls flat on her face in the middle of the run, and people are shocked. It's, oh, that's so sad. She was leading. It's so sad. She gets up and covers the entire distance lost and wins the freaking run. Wins it. I mean, like a machine, because she had practiced for that day for 3 years. She had committed herself to it. It was her identity. There was no hesitation. She fell on her face. She got up and she ran like there was no tomorrow. And it wasn't from desperation. She was gliding in her stride because she was totally focused on one outcome, and that was she was going to win, right? And it wasn't that others were going to lose, because she ended up beating her own teammates who'd picked up the second and third, the first and second slots.
Yeah.
But it was because it was so ingrained in her. She had rehearsed it again and again and again, and there was just no other outcome possible. She didn't grab her leg, she didn't rub her knees, she didn't cry out, she didn't ask for help. She just got up and ran, because it was part of who she was. That was her identity at that time. And it's a phenomenal thing to watch. I strongly recommend it for people, because it is just like, that couldn't happen, and you just witnessed it happening.
We'll have to put it in the show notes. I mean, it definitely elaborates on the possibility of what is possible. You know, we look at all these guys and we think to ourselves, wow, like I would wish I would be where Russell Brunson is or all these millionaires. But what we don't forget is that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they were in the same position as you were, right? They they all had, or even worse,
Russell was a married, broke college student with a potato gun on his first website.
right?
Right?
And
I mean,
and
he didn't know if it was going to work. He did, I mean, it was his first product, a potato gun. Yeah, well, he lived in Idaho. I mean, there are plenty of potatoes, so potato guns are a thing in Idaho.
so what's the difference between Russell and you or me or anybody else? The thing is, we're looking at him now. We're forgetting that he had all the trials and tribulations before the limelight was on him of how big of a success he is now. We forget that he was going to university as a wrestler and was just his why was the most important because he wanted to
And
figure out.
he's not even doing his real why. See, that's the interesting thing about it. His desire to become an Olympic athlete was enough to drive him to learn how to become one of the best digital marketers that's ever lived. Right now, I believe he holds the record of the most dollars sold from a stage ever. Right at the 10x uh,
Yeah, the 10x
seminar
con, yeah,
two
with
year
the mhm.
right 2 years ago, and so I think he sold something like $6 million on stage at one in 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's phenomenal. And yet he will probably never be that Olympic wrestler. He still wrestles, but what drove him to learn as much as he could and to practice as much as he could and also to work out as much as he could has made him a successful father, a successful husband, and a very, very successful businessman.
Exactly. Exactly. And that initial why was because he wanted to make enough money to take care of his new wife. He
Hmm.
wanted to make enough money so where he can actually focus on his passion, which was wrestling, versus going to university to be able to wrestle. Right. So he had a strong enough commitment. And even though those whys may have changed now to more family and growing ClickFunnels and other programs, it's really that question that you need to ask yourself when you're getting tired, when you're wondering if you can do the nights and weekends, when you're wondering if you should be working um, on your business instead of going out and hanging out with friends or watching TV. That why needs to be burning inside of you to get you to do the action that you know is necessary when you don't want to. And for you to develop that why, not only do you have to think about if you did achieve success, what would that mean to you? Who would it impact? What would that mean for your friends and family? What would you be doing with your time and effort? What are the things that you've always wanted that you were told you can never have, that if you had success, you can achieve? These are all things that you ideally want to write down and think about and dream board. And for those of you that have been part of the dream board training that is part of the VIP course, we cover this extensively of how to visualize the life you want and then how to actually break down your income goals into realistic timeframes and how to backtrack that to certain amount of sales of products you have to do in a different multi-tiered approach so that way you can hit that income goal. And only once you do that can you actually truly have an idea of how to achieve it. Because oftentimes we're told, oh, just think about the goal and manifest it. And in a way, that does work. But now, if you truly want to make it work even more, you have to apply the actions and the strategies to achieve the goals in conjunction with the mindset. And when those all work together, that's really when you have all the cylinders going for you to be able to achieve your dreams. And by achieving your dreams, the vehicle to achieve them, which is your online business.
Well, and I mean, this is something that's happened for Russell that he didn't imagine was possible when he got started, and that is he has become a supporter of charities. Right? He is consistently supporting charities. One of them that he supports particularly is something called the Underground Railroad, which is a charity for trafficked children. And he helped produce a video for them, which is about 50 minutes long, and it is very impactful. So this is law enforcement agents, retired FBI agents, SEALs, Rangers, um, Marines who will actually go into action in this country or in foreign countries to break up groups that are trafficking children, right? Because this is a problem around the world that kids are being used for sexual purposes, and they've rescued hundreds of kids at this point and had to deal with law enforcement agencies in foreign countries. They've had to deal with extradition orders. They've had to deal with all kinds of legal issues, and without his success he wouldn't have had the financial wherewithal to help this organization not only get created but get sustained
Yeah.
because of this. So his purpose, this is a guy who loves kids and has a big family, and it totally it is completely consistent with his value system, and he's helped them create marketing that really works for them for a very important project in this world. And
Yeah.
I laud him for all of the positive impacts that he's had, because he really is genuinely as nice a guy as he looks like.
Absolutely. And that is why your mission and your purpose behind what you're doing has to be beyond yourself, right?
Oh,
You talk to all the successful people, they do it for their family first off, right? Then they do it for their church or their community, right? Or they do it for something that gives them, a feeling of fulfillment. And only when you can, provide value through your webinars or your coaching or your articles, for me personally, the reason I do this is because I've had to figure it out very difficultly myself, but I stand on the shoulders of giants and people who've been doing this for years before me, and because of them, I'm able to supercharge my growth. I'm able to learn even more. But now, I remember when I was just starting, I remember one time somebody said, "You'll remember the day that people start asking you for advice, Alan, because that will be where you will be, and they will be where you are." And for me, that gives me a lot of fulfillment to be able to shortcut somebody's success, to make sure that they don't have the same bloody forehead and pains and loss of income that I've had doing such small little nuanced things that you never even done it yourself, you have never known. You right. And that is part of my why. My part of my why is being able to provide for myself and my family and my friends to a level that I truly want to do, but cannot do because of resources. And when you look at these guys' photos and videos of the Bentleys and the mansions, they're not doing that to impress you. They're doing that to impress upon you what is possible, to raise your level of belief that they're somebody just like you. They have to open a window when they go to the bathroom, right? Everybody shit smells, right? They have problems in their life too. They have challenges and successes. They have blood running through their veins. They have to eat every couple hours also. Like, it's doable. What is doable for one is doable for anybody. The question is, do you have the same level of mindset? Do you have the same level of determination? Do you have the fire within you to do what's necessary to go a little bit further when everybody else is quitting? Right? Do
well,
you
and
have
and the answer is you do. The challenge is, can you access it? And that's really where your why comes in. The why is a direct tap into what you are totally made of and what you can become. It is the equivalent of the imaginal cells in a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. And it's not necessarily that easy. Sometimes it's running around feeling like you're going to throw up for a period of time until you get over your next hurdle. But the the key with that is you can be sustained in that when you have that goal. Same with a high school runner. A lot of them will run until they puke. Why do they do that? Because they want to get good enough to be able to hit that next mark. And their body is resisting doing what it takes to get there. Doesn't mean it's not possible, right? This famous Roger Bannister story of breaking the 4 minute mile, that occurred as a consequence of somebody who was able to visualize actually doing something that people have been trying to do for thousands of years and claimed was physically impossible for a human being. High schoolers break the 4 minute mile now.
it's amazing. I mean, it really pushes our thoughts to what is possible. Before, when I was starting in the industry, people would say $1 million launch is impossible. There's no way you could do it. Nowadays, there's $1 million days. So the
Yep.
question is, who are you learning from? Who are you getting your advice from? Do they have the results you want? Or are they on the journey and can actually show you the next step ahead? And do you really believe you can do it? For a long time, I was just studying reading books, attending seminars, and I truly didn't believe I could do it. What's so special about Allen, right? And there was a clicking point. There's a point in all of our lives, in all of our careers, where we finally go from sounding like somebody, and we've all been in meetings with those people that they know all the right keywords, they know all the right wording, but they just don't believe it. And you can tell, right? They've maybe read a couple articles and they know the SEO
All
and
hat and no cattle.
all hat no kettle, right? And there's that tipping point for all of us, right? And that comes from actually applying it to a level of going from unknowingness to knowingness to finally knowing and proficiency to eventually unconsciously doing it. So when I look at a website now, after being in this industry for so many years, I can spit off one, two, three, four, five. This is what's wrong. Right. Just as a professional plumber can take a look at a drain and be like, well, this is your challenge here. We all need to develop ourselves in our career and in our marketing ability and our entrepreneur ability, because I guarantee you the reason why Bezos and all the other big guys are where they're at is because of all those nuances of lessons, the day in, the day out, the long nights when you have no future or hope, and you're bleak, but those days have molded them to who they become today. And that is the journey that you're on as an entrepreneur and as a digital marketer. So I would really love to wrap up this interview and this talk with one of my favorite thing Jack has taught me, which is the hero's journey. Can you explain to those who don't know what the hero journey is and how it applies to every area of their life, and especially with their digital business that they're building?
Well, Alan, thanks for mentioning that. The hero's journey was discovered by, not created by, Joseph Campbell, and the first most obvious example of it in Western culture is probably the original Star Wars movie, because the hero's journey was purposefully and intentionally written as the format for that script. So the whole movie was designed around the hero's journey. What Joseph Campbell discovered through his study of ancient Native American and other indigenous peoples' oral and written and visual tradition, as well as the major myths throughout the world, because he was a mythologist, was that there was one common story that was between all of the cultures. It was true in uh, Shinto work in Japan, in the religion. It was true in Zen Buddhism. It was true across the board, and that is that human beings follow a pathway of life experience growth that can be called the hero's journey. So the hero stories, whether they're mythological or more contemporary fiction, follow a traditional pathway that speaks to our unconscious, because it's part of how the oral tradition has been passed on for 100,000 or more years. So it's already baked into our unconscious, and it's baked into the structure of our brains. And it starts with, you know, a typical person in a typical state of life in relative happiness. And then some event happens that shocks that reality and causes the person to wake up. And that's typically referred to as the call. So, Luke Skywalker has a calling to adventure, and he finds out that his home has been destroyed after that experience, and that sends him on the rest of the journey of self-discovery to be able to get to settle the score for the murder of his family and the destruction of his property, which then becomes, his work as a Jedi, becoming a Jedi in order to support the Empire. Well, that same process of the hero's journey is found in our lives, and it's what gives us meaning. And if you look at the cycle, what ends up happening is as a person gets on the pathway, there's a number of places where we experience challenges and maybe go into, something called a pit, a dark place, a dark night of the soul,
Hmm.
but then discover some hidden treasure within us about understanding how it was we formed, incorrect beliefs as a child, or how the story we made up as a child led to other experiences in our life. And we come back with wisdom that is actually a contribution for our future generations and for the rest of our lives, quite possibly for the whole of society.
Yeah.
So an entrepreneur's journey is very much like a hero's journey because it's filled with pitfalls and challenges and tests of one's ability to grow and expand and increase in the capacity to give, because the whole key is around service. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get rich in the process. What that means is that your riches are unlikely to have much value or meaning until you understand what makes you feel fulfilled and how your work is contribution to society as a whole, to your family, and to the world at large.
Couldn't say.
And this is all spelled out in the hero's journey. And every single human being on the planet is living at some stage of the hero's journey. And because of the nature of our technology in these days, we can have multiple heroes' journeys in our lives. And this wasn't true in previous generations. Life was, difficult and short for people in many, many generations of the past.
Yeah.
Not so much at the present. We have so many gifts, and yet our society conditions us to believe that we have less than we need. We are the richest culture in the history of this planet as a whole. There are tools that we take for granted on a daily basis, such as the cell phone, that is stronger than the computer that sent the original Apollo mission to the moon. There's more computing power in this than in the rooms full of computers that sent the Apollo mission forward. And no king of Babylon, no king in Jerusalem had the capacity for instantaneous communication, yet alone jet travel or any of the other things that we take for granted. And we are doubling and doubling and doubling our technological growth. Now, does that mean that we have more than one planet? No, there is a sustainability issue in this world. We need to take care of the way we utilize our resources and do so in a respectful and renewable way. But the truth of the matter is there are infinite potential ways to move forward. Buckminster Fuller in 1954 said that every single living human being on the planet could be a millionaire with just the technology that existed in the world at that time. The problem was a distribution problem. Now, in counter argument, people have said, well, if you redistributed all the wealth today in 10 years, the same people would be wealthy and maybe wealthier. And I'm not saying that that isn't true, but that is actually a mindset and identity issue. It's cultural and belief issues. It's not anything to do with finiteness of money and wealth.
Yeah. Yep.
Those things are infinite because it's created from a bargain we make about value. We invent the stuff. It didn't exist. We used to have to trade goats and cattle and corn and objects with each other. Now we have cash currency and electronic funds. We agree that those mean something. We exchange them all around. Some people have more of it than others, but there is an infinite amount of it available. Somebody told me recently that there was a study done that we were at $1.3 million per person on the planet because of some additional growth and some changes of valuation of currency. Well, how many people are actually living as the millionaires that they truly are? They're
Uh,
not living in the love
I mean,
of their true source.
I, I,
That's the challenge.
yeah.
Getting that hero's journey is where you find the juice in what's being offered in your experience.
Absolutely, because we all grow through each of those stages. And that is
Absolutely.
what your business is. You know, that is what your calling is. That's what your passion is. That's why you're doing this, right? If you didn't have the desire, you would be working at Pizza Hut or Domino's, right? You like working somebody else's dream, right?
Right.
And still it's not bad, it's not terrible, but the reason why the guy at Domino's is miserable is because he's not thinking about his why. He could still be happy delivering the food to the parent that is busy working and seeing the smile on the kid's face because they're having time together enjoying their favorite food. It's the same thing. The question is, how big of a why do you have? How big is your focus? How many people is going to impact? And I highly suggest you go through the evaluation process in the show notes and the additional resources that we're going to be providing for the VIP members, because this is really the foundation of what is successful. A lot of people ask me like, Alan, you know, the website technically is working, but I'm not able to close anybody, right? Why are the leads not good? Well, it's all nonverbal. It's all based off of the mission and how you talk to somebody, how you care for somebody. And that is what Jack is really, really good at. And with his private clients and the people that he works with one on one, and it's very limited because he is an awesome expert at what he does. He's able to help you identify what that is for you personally in your own life, and then help you get rid of those foundational blocks that are weighing you down from being the person you truly want to be, not only mentally, but also emotionally, which are two different things that a lot of people don't talk about. And being able to have all of the tools, not only himself, but teach you to consistently use so that way you can improve your life in all the areas you want to do. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Jack. I am going to have you definitely come back for more topics. You're a wealth of knowledge, one of my dear friends and mentors. Jack, how can they be able to get in touch with you? And where can they find you on social media? And if they're interested, what do you currently have for people that are listening all the way to the end here as a special bonus for them?
Well, my website is www.jackaustin.com, and you know, there's a presence there. There's contact form and so forth. There's I have a presence on social media at Jack L Austin um, on Facebook, and uh, that's sort of my primary contact area. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Jack L Austin Jr. And the my next project is guilt-free-fatherhood.com, and that isn't launched yet, but it's going to be launched in the next 30 days. And I'm going to be doing a summit with experts around the topic of child rearing, right, and parenting. And the reason is because my personal experience around childhood wasn't that great, and my parents were fine people. They had their challenges like everybody does, but the distinction is that they just didn't know what they were doing, and I made shit up. Well, you have a bright child. Bright children have imaginations and they make stories up. No one, as they say, escapes childhood unscathed. So I've developed a set of expertise, and I work typically with entrepreneurs who are highly successful and have a skill set that's really very refined. And I help them up level their businesses, 2 3x their businesses. In many cases, sometimes it's been more. Like I worked with the Zay Ortiz from Iron Man 2. He did the whole 12 minutes of the Jarvis sequence, shot the whole thing for the director, and created all the animation with his team. And, you know, to come from a situation of being a digital marketer, effectively, a graphic artist in his own agency, to co-founder and art director for a $50 million IPO with Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, within a year of working with me. And that opportunity just was nowhere to be seen until he actually stepped into who he was next. He actually changed his name as a consequence of that. And it's something he dreamed about but had never done. And he had small children. And the initial concern was the guilt he was feeling around not being present for his kids and being on the phone instead of present as father during the special unrepeatable period of toddlerhood for kids. They're only going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 twice. Oh, wait, once. Yeah, that's it. Once.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, well, if they live to be 95 or older, perhaps, but the truth of the matter is that sets off a lot of entrepreneurs. They feel driven to do their work, but they want to have value in their family, and they're pulled in two different directions. So I helped him be able to get those balances in place and to adjust his identity. He left Hollywood behind because he was feeling overwhelmed after having worked in it for 2 decades and just not being treated as the artist that he was. Yet he found new ownership and significantly more money in private business creating games in the gaming industry. And it's something that he'd done since childhood, and it's something he was proficient at. And I mean, who could, the founder of Atari, who could be a better person to work with?
That's
That
great.
kind of transformation is exactly the kind of hero's journey that is available in every single one of us. We just have to tap into what is our greatest potential and what is our greatest imagination to activate who we really are.
And you could do it yourself over time. It might take a lifetime, it might take two, you know.
Well, we tend to have blinders, right? Blind spots about ourselves. I can't see all of my potential like some of my mentors can see it because they've been there. They're already there. They've seen it already, and they have a deep insight into where I am. With their insights and know-how, I can access things that I simply couldn't before. And
Absolutely.
it's just the truth. I mean,
That's the
that's
truth.
the nature of how we are as human beings.
And that's why you need somebody like Jack Austin in your corner helping you. Because just like the blinders, you cannot see beyond what is set. And when you truly have somebody who can help you see the lines of the matrix by breaking down how the mind works, how we perceive our emotions, and how we interact with others, that is truly the value of having somebody as a coach working with you, because you do need coaches in every single area of your life, not only in finance, also in business, but also in mindset as well. So when you are teamed up with the right people and you have a big enough supporting cast along on your show of your life, that is where you can actually do some amazing things. And Jack is definitely somebody I would recommend, as well as all the people that are coming on the show to help improve these areas of your life that you've identified that you want to get better at and actually take action on. So thank you so much once again, Jack. Shout out the website again for everybody who's listening right now.
www.jackaustin.com.
jackaustin.com. Thanks so much for being on Conversion Icons. I appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared with us, the lessons and some of the tools for the VIPs. Go ahead and look for the show notes and other task lists and bonuses that are included. And excited for your upcoming summit that you're going to be launching. And let us know what we can do to support you. And I think it would be a great topic that some of the people listening on Conversion Icons, who are a family man, a father, would love to implement in their own business and their own life. Because truly, you can be very wealthy, but be miserable. And that is the difference between living a successful life and one of just mediocre. And anybody who's currently listening and is a VIP member of Conversion Icons is striving for improvements in every area of their life. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed this recording. I'll see you on the next one. Once again, Alan with Conversion Icons.
Thanks, Ellen.